Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us. A lot going on this week in Washington, D.C. Even though we're celebrating the Independence Day holiday, the White House is embroiled in yet another scandal tied to cocaine. I'll talk about that. We have new records out of the Air Force Academy that are going to outrage you and I think cause grave concern about the future of our military once you hear what we've uncovered. Plus, we have new documents about the waste, fraud, and abuse up in New York with the illicit prosecution of Trump, plus a great new ruling against Biden administration censorship and for the First Amendment. First up is the big news this week is the fact that there was cocaine found in the White House. Now, what we've been seeing over the last several days is a slow motion cover-up by the Biden White House about the cocaine. Supposedly it was found Sunday night somewhere in the White House, allegedly first in the library, which is part of the personal section of the White House, the West Wing, so to speak. And they found the white powder. Evidently they had to close the White House down because they didn't know what it was for security purposes, and they tested it and it turned out to be cocaine. And since then, the White House has gone into damage control cover-up mode, refusing to say one way or the other whether the cocaine came from a member of the Biden family. Dan Bongino, our friend, is a former Secret Service agent at the top level, said, look, there's no way cocaine gets into the White House other than through a family member or I guess maybe a staff person. I doubt a Secret Service agent brought it in, but a family member would bypass the typical security procedures to get into the White House. And back during the last administration, I have been honored to go into the West Wing of the White House. And the West Wing of the White House is where the president works and the Oval Office and the other top staff of the president. And there are two entrances. There's an entrance. Just think of the White House facing Pennsylvania Avenue. The entrances tend to be to the left on the White House there. And there's an entrance down at what I would call a basement type entrance. And then up a little bit in the front of the White House is another entrance, and that's the West Wing lobby entrance. And so we've had this, I call this magical bag, dime bag of cocaine kind of move throughout the White House. All these leaks changing where the location was. Now, the library is an area that is even less accessible than other areas of the White House, which would tend to suggest that maybe it was someone like Hunter or someone very close to the president or his staff who had access to that room where the cocaine was found. But since then, the leaks have changed the location of the dime bag's location. Now, the third leak, or the second leak, was up near where cell phones are kept by visitors when they visit the White House. Now, that's that top entrance I told you about. And so what happens is you go in, the door opens, and there's immediately to your left, there's a room that only a few people can stand in at once with a bunch of cubby holes or drawers where you can put your cell phone in. You're asked to put your cell phone in there. And it's full of security. I mean, there's obviously, there are great Marines at the door. There's at least 2 or 3 Secret Service agents immediately past the door. And so there's no way anyone's going to drop a dime bag of cocaine in that area without it being noticed. And then you go a few feet further, like 2 feet further, and to your right is a receptionist. And then there's this lobby area where people sit, and you see senior staff and other visitors for the president there on official business, or senior visitors for other senior officials in the White House are waiting. Again, a very small area, 2 couches. It's kind of like a bigger living room, right? And then you go down the hallway a little bit from that location. There's a diplomatic room. I think it's the diplomatic room or the Roosevelt room. I forget which room it's called. But anyway, there's a meeting room. Very nice. And just a few feet further, you get into the Oval Office area, the ante room, the ante office for the White House, for the Oval Office, and then the President's Oval Office. So initially they said this dime bag was found near where those phones were. So near is virtually everywhere in that section of the White House. The White House lobby, that public meeting room that I've told you about that's only accessible to people who've gone through security. And by the way, to get to the West Wing, you go through 2 levels of security. There's a front area, there's an area at 17th Street, or the other side on 15th Street. And then to get into the West Wing, you have to go through another section of another security process, which is a bit more exhaustive. They look at your bags, you go through the magnetometer, etc. So you don't just show up off the street and go into the West Wing of the White House. So that's my way. And so now downstairs, so evidently that was a little too close to the Oval Office when they said they found that cocaine upstairs. So then there was a leak that said, oh, no, they found it downstairs. Now downstairs, it's even tighter than it is upstairs. You go downstairs, you walk into the area, there's immediately a Secret Service agent, I think a uniformed agent, sitting at a desk. And there's and the desk takes up most of the hallway. So you got to really walk around the desk, either to go upstairs to the West Wing's floor where the president is, or to get past him to go into what I believe to be the Situation Room. I've never been in there. And then there's the White House mess. And so this is a very small area. It's a small hallway area. You're in each other's way if you're even standing there. And so there's no way a dime bag's going to be dropped there, which is the third place it supposedly showed up, without anyone seeing it immediately. So what you're seeing here is an obvious cover-up. And I was laughing with one of my colleagues here, Chris Farrell, and it's like in Washington, that we're expected to believe it's Washington, D.C. Dime bags are just blowing all over the streets here in Washington, D.C., and I guess they just blew into the White House and maybe blew up the nose of someone in the White House. I mean, who are they kidding? And the quite obvious question is it Hunter's cocaine? It's fair to ask, given his near constant presence at the White House, so much so that folks have asked, is he living there? And he was there as recently, I know he was there on Friday. They left Friday evening to go to Camp David again with President Biden for who knows what reason. And then obviously he came back and he was there earlier this week over the July 4th holiday. I guess they had a special celebration at the White House then for the fireworks here in Washington, D.C. So was it Hunter? I don't know. You would think you could get a straightforward answer out of the Biden White House about whether it was associated with the family. But of course, they don't want to give you a straightforward answer. They said it's irresponsible to ask the question. So I suspect in the end, and there were headlines saying, and the media has been prepping the battlefield for the Biden White House, saying, we may never know who dropped this dime bag of cocaine in the White House. We may never know. It will be an eternal mystery, just like that Supreme Court leaker, just like everything else that happens in this town that compromises the rule of law. It's, we can never figure out who did the bad thing. We don't know who leaked all this information on Trump out of the Justice Department and targeting him. We don't know who leaked this Supreme Court brief that resulted in death threats and targeting of the Supreme Court in an effort to blow up the Supreme Court. And I think CNN had a headline that said the Secret Service is going to end their investigation, even though they may not know who had left the dime bag behind. Now, so I said I've been in the West Wing, so I know those two areas. Now, I don't know what cameras are there about. I just presume there's cameras all over the place. So I mean, no one's being fooled here. And so you could just presume the worst. And this is why Judicial Watch has initiated its own investigation into the Biden cocaine scandal. We have our FOIAs to the Secret Service, which has been used and abused before by the Biden gang. You may recall we uncovered and blew the whistle on the fact that dogs, or excuse me, Joe Biden's dog had attacked the Secret Service and other White House staff repeatedly, which was contrary to the White House line that there was just one minor incident, and there were several incidents, none of which were minor. You know, imagine being on the wrong end of a German Shepherd dog attack. So, you know, the Secret Service has been treated like dirt by the Biden White House in large measure. And even more recently, Biden was suggesting the Secret Service was lying about the dog attacks. So do you think they're going to do anything serious in terms of exposing Joe Biden's his son's criminal activities potentially in the White House? Especially since, as Judicial Watch has also uncovered through litigation, that both the Secret Service and the FBI, you know, we followed up with litigation based on press reports, helped vacuum up information to protect Hunter Biden from the consequences of having his gun thrown in a garbage can by his then girlfriend, the widow of his dead brother. It was just crazy town. And of course, let's go back a step further. Why would we be surprised that Joe Biden's son, Hunter, or just generally there's cocaine in this White House when there's been tens of millions of dollars of money laundered into the Biden family, what I call racketeering operation, by the Chinese, the Russians, the Ukrainians? I mean, given that level of corruption and the cover-up of that corruption, would it be a surprise or unexpected that there be cocaine in this White House? I mean, that's the least of it, don't you think? And the fact that the media is pretending that this is all normal and we may never know who did it, and the sort of casual approach to the crisis of law and order in the White House, it's just a further indictment of this city and the failure of our legal institutions to grapple with this unprecedented corruption in the White House. And I don't want to overstate the corruption involved in having someone bringing coke into the White House, other than the obvious national security and other implications. But to me, it's a symptom of a bigger problem that the Biden administration has been compromised by the corruption of the president and his family. And there's no getting around it. And that's why I think there's so much public interest here, because Hunter just got, he just got the sweetheart plea deal. There's evidence of corruption involving that sweetheart plea deal where the FBI and the Justice Department and the IRS colluded and collaborated to protect him and conspired. And so what is Biden's response to this, Joe Biden's response to this? Have Hunter Biden front and center in the White House in social event after social event. Well, kind of like, the Godfather saying, this is my son and he's untouchable. Thumbing his nose at the cops, practically speaking. So this is why this cocaine issue is important, and it highlights the Biden White House corruption, how other agencies get compromised because of that corruption, namely the Secret Service and other law enforcement responsible for protecting the White House. And of course, if the White House compromises the Secret Service, that compromises the safety and security, not only of the president, but everyone else who the Secret Service protects here in Washington, D.C. So it's just terrible. And but Judicial Watch isn't just going to sit and complain about it. We're going to do our own investigation and see if we can figure out what really went on, because we don't trust this White House or this Secret Service to do it honestly on its own, because the leadership, as I said, consistently fails the American people. So there you have it, the Biden cocaine scandal. I did not think I'd be talking about cocaine in the Biden White House, but here we are. God bless America, right? So next up is something that's very disturbing. We had this tremendous decision last week out of the Supreme Court that reminded us in this Harvard admissions case, University of North Carolina admissions cases, where they overruled or outlawed, finally, the use of race to figure out who should be admitted to colleges and universities. And in doing so, they reminded Americans that the Constitution is supposed to be colorblind. And there was some interesting language in there in the decision that, well, maybe the military academies and the military can still discriminate on race if they want. And they didn't really address that directly. Well, I don't believe the military academies or anyone else in the government can discriminate on race in selecting people for membership. I guess maybe sometimes you might need someone of a particular race to conduct a particular mission. So I guess that's probably what the court was thinking about. But in terms of the military academies and such, that to me is just a pernicious issue that should be excised from decision making in selecting those who join our academies, making choices based in part on race. So that's one issue. But there's this other big issue, I think, that as the Constitution being a colorblind document, it really, in my view, prevents and further highlights why this racist, racialist, Marxist, communist, anti-American critical race theory should be eliminated from our U.S. military academies. We are in crisis right now, our military is, because under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is code for racialism, racism, Marxism, anti-Americanism, they are segregating, targeting people based on race, and are obviously attacking the American way. And Judicial Watch has been in the lead in exposing what's been going on at West Point, the Navy Academy in Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy. We have several pieces of litigation and FOIAs to expose how this Biden administration has made critical race theory a guiding force in a guiding principle in training our military. And as a result, our rising leadership is being trained in this racialism, or rising leadership in the military. I mean, this is the next generation of military leaders, right? These are the rising officers, at least at the at the college level. And they're being trained to hate America. They are trying to alienate our nation's military from the America that they're trying, that they're presumably wanting to defend. And you know, most of those guys and gals who are in these academies, they want to do what you think they would want to do joining the military, which is defend the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. But their leadership isn't interested in that anymore. They're interested in using the military as part of a cutting-edge revolutionary cadre to change America from a republic, in my view, to a racialist, socialist, Marxist state, if I could be blunt. And I see evidence of this in training materials we were able to obtain thanks to a Judicial Watch lawsuit. So none of this stuff is given to us voluntarily. This is all as a result of a lawsuit after they refused to turn over the information the information in response to a request for Air Force Academy training materials on critical race theory. We filed the lawsuit in November of last year, and we got a batch of documents, about 478 pages. I didn't print them out for you. I should have printed them out. From the Air Force Academy, which includes instructional materials and emails that address topics such as critical race theory, white privilege, and of course, Black Lives Matter. The records include, and there's a lot of records, I encourage you to review all 478 pages and ask why $1 in tax dollars is being used to promote this anti-American garbage. But I'm going to highlight some of what we have uncovered here. There's a presentation that includes a headline, part of a lesson, that depicts tables which purport to show how there are correlations between Republican Party identification and old-fashioned racism among white Americans. So immediately you've got the military training their young leaders And of course, there are other, and they're being trained by both civilian and military personnel at the academies as well, how to target one political party as being racist. So it's not only ideological, but it's partisan and abuse. This is just some other great stuff. Additional slides talk about how white identity shapes politics and contains tables purporting to show effect of white identity on empathy towards people of color, effect of white identity on support for voter ID laws. So election interference by the military. That's how I interpret this. Effect of white identity on support for political violence. What is going on at the Air Force Academy? A CRT talking points document prepared at the direction of the Air Force Academy superintendent that includes the question, does CRT teach, CRT, critical race theory, teach cadets to hate our country? So they have a scripted answer, which attacks white people. Much of what is divisive about CRT is that it's hard for people to hear the words, quote, white supremacy, unquote, without feeling defensive, even though that is the academically correct way to talk about most of American history. They hate America there in the Air Force Academy. I mean, I don't know how else, I don't like to say that about folks who have probably been there many, many years, but this is what they're training. This is beyond disturbing. And I didn't even, you have to, we've got the, I guess we'll post the release. I'm not even reading every document we put in the release. But you'll see, it is beyond outrageous. I'm going to highlight, I don't know if it's the best of the worst, or the worst of the worst. There's an email exchange between a virtual, discussing a hosting of a virtual discussion with this author who, I guess, wrote a book called Teaching Race, or maybe this is the topic of the discussion, Teaching Race, How to Help Students Unmask and Challenge Racism. At least that title seems, you can imagine what they're going to try to cram into that. But at least the title seems normal. But then you see there's discussions. The white elephant in the room, and white is in parentheticals. So again, attacks on white people. So racism, racialism, and bullets which partially, hold on a second. Oh, and then there's a bullet that shows, allows you to demonstrate how to engage in difficult conversations in a way focused on behaviors, not personhood, and on learned white supremacy, not essential moral differences or failings. Another bullet states it allows you to facilitate racial affinity groups. So in one breath, they're saying, oh, well, all of this is learned behavior. I mean, it can be unlearned. It's not because of your race. You learn to be a white supremacist. And on the other hand, they want to segregate people by race. So when they say allows you to facilitate racial affinity groups, that is segregation by race by the United States Air Force Academy. Another slide is titled in a racist way, The Fatigue of WWW, Witnessing White Wokeness. Hard Truths I've Learned as a White Instructor Leader, there's another slide, contains bullets such as, I must assume that for students and colleagues of color, everything is seen through the lens of race. For them, nothing is race-free. So not only are they attacking whites, they're presuming that minorities and blacks have a particular ideological viewpoint simply because of the color of their skin. So there's racism all around. There's racism for everyone in the Air Force Academy. They abuse whites and blacks and other minorities. And this is what else they demand instructors do. I must acknowledge my own racist behavior when it's pointed out to me, not try to explain it away, not protest my innocence. So if you're accused by racism, they're telling taxpayer-funded employees at the Air Force Academy, you must confess. Straight out of the Communist playbook. The show trials. Remember Stalin? You had to confess. Didn't matter what the evidence is, you must confess. Another slide from this Brookfield discussion. I must never ask people of color. And these are all, there's this weird capitalization. I must never is all capitalized. Ask people of color to teach me about racism. Figuring out what whites should do is my responsibility. I mean, this vicious, nasty, virulent antagonism to someone based on their race. Imagine having to sit through this. I must never confess my racism so as to seek absolution from BIPOC students and colleagues. Oh, so you can't confess to being a racist by seeking an in with Black, Indigenous, people of color. That's BIPOC, right? I don't even know what, Black, Indigenous, people of color. What's an Indigenous? I know what they mean, but of course it makes no sense to a normal person, right? A slide in another class, it looks like, Lesson 28 in Behavioral Science 362 is titled, What is CRT? And they explain it. So if you when they tell you, you don't understand what critical race theory is, you stupid conservatives, you stupid white people, which is what the left says. No white people are allowed to talk about critical race theory. And if they do and they criticize it, it means they don't understand it. It's the Marxist way. Recognize that race is not biologically reality, but socially constructed and socially significant. That's Marxist. Helps us understand, is the pigment of your skin a biological reality? I think it is. Now, there are cultural issues that arise from different races, and obviously we had slavery here in the United States. I recognize that. But what they're trying to do is saying that your color is a social, you behave a certain way based on the color of your skin, and it's immutable, your behavior. Unless, of course, you have your consciousness raised by the Marxists. Helps us understand the legacy of racism and how embedded within it is within social institutions. Sees racism as systemic. So that's critical race theory. It sees racism as systemic. And when you say that racism is systemic in the United States of America, you are saying the United States of America needs to be overturned as a country. It is a revolutionary Marxist concept. It attacks the heart of our nation. It attacks our Constitution. It attacks our Declaration. It attacks everything we've done as a country for the last 250 years or so, right? We're coming up on our 250th anniversary. Well, next slide that we highlight talks about the 1619 Project, which is this leftist canard that America was founded on the basis of slavery as opposed to the reality of the American Revolution in 1776. A presentation, we're not sure whether it's for faculty or students, is titled Free Speech in the Military and has a slide labeled The Commie Cadet, obviously promoting the Commie Cadet. You may have seen pictures of him, which includes images of a West Point cadet named Spencer Raponi, I think that's how his name is pronounced, at his West Point graduation ceremony, showing the inside of his cap in which is written, "Communism will win," and one of them wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt under his uniform. Now, Che Guevara was a mass-murdering communist out of Cuba. A presentation apparently, so they're promoting how this cadet in West Point is promoting communism, okay? A presentation apparently intended for the cadets is titled American Political System and Theory, Lessons 25 through 31, Law and Democracy, and a slide containing a list of information under things to know. Critical race theory studies racism as a social construct, and proponents say learning the history of racism is crucial to addressing inequities. Again, there's another presentation that describes critical race theory as the view. This is something that you should listen to because this is the left telling you what they're up to. The view that the law and legal institutions are inherently racist and that race itself, instead of being biologically grounded and natural, is a socially constructed concept that is used by white people to further their economic and political interests at the expense of people of color. Now, I'm not going to explain it any further because I don't think it survives a rational analysis other than to kind of change the Marxist theory of class conflict and kind of inserting a racial conflict and saying that everyone of a particular race needs to be corrected, to put it mildly, if not eliminated from the political culture in their power politics and their revolutionary analysis. And this is the attack on the American founding. This is a bullet point. Another slide discusses, quote, the myth of American peoplehood, with one bullet claiming the U.S. too has a creation myth. The Declaration of Independence declares that all men have rights endowed by their Creator. Ideas of social contracts forged in a state of nature. They're saying that's a creation myth. It's a myth. Your God-given rights is a myth. That concept is a myth. Air Force Academy. The Air Force is fomenting racialism, racial separatism, and segregation and anti-white hatred among the rising young leadership at the Air Force Academy. These documents show the Biden Defense Department is teaching these cadets on how to hate America using repackaged revolutionary Marxist propaganda. And this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the materials that Judicial Watch is uncovering, and will be getting related to critical race theory and the effort to destroy our military from within by these radical Marxists. And those generals, those civilian leaders at the Pentagon who are responsible for this, they should be drummed out of office, have their positions defunded, if they're up for promotion. I think the top guy in the Air Force, the top general in the Air Force, is up for promotion to retire to replace Milley, the corrupt, treacherous General Milley. Is anyone going to ask the Air Force general about what his academy has been doing to our recruits, to our cadets there? As I said, we've got litigation about what's going on in West Point, at the Naval Academy. We've challenged quota programs in California successfully, racial scholarships in North Carolina, public union contract, the teachers union contract that requires racial discrimination in Minneapolis. But in terms of the threat to the American way, does it get any worse than having our military being turned against America? Does it? I don't think so. And so this is why I'm getting a little bit upset about it, because I think the future of our country is at stake, and we need to stop it. We need to end it. Who knows? Maybe the courts will step in and say you need to stop this racism. It's prohibited. Everyone deserves equal protection under the laws, right? Under the 14th Amendment. And to start attacking and segregating people based on race by government or agencies that, or even entities that get government funding is illegal under the Constitution and federal civil rights laws. It's going to be there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done, and Judicial Watch is already doing it to defend the Constitution and our Republican system of government from this revolutionary critical race theory concept. And I say critical race theory because it's just one element of the Marxist revolutionary approach to discussing virtually every constitutional and institutional basis for this great country. I mean, you see this with queer theory and radical feminist theory. They're all different flavors of the same revolutionary concept. So they're trying to destroy our military. On the other hand, you have these transgender extremists who are trying to mutilate our children and adults. I mean, attacking biology. I mean, if they're attacking biology, do you think attacking the military is going to be any less of a challenge for them? These revolutionaries brook no opponents and seek to transform every institution. So I talked earlier about the lawlessness and how the various Justice Department and federal agencies, so the FBI, Secret Service, have protected and enabled Biden and other partisan ideological corruption, while these same agencies abuse the rule of law to target people like President Trump and other innocents. And we see this up in New York City specifically, a local version of it, where Soros supported prosecutor Alvin Bragg, and left-wing extremist, has abused his office in the rule of law to engage in an unprecedented effort to try to jail Trump over I guess it was a confidentiality agreement with someone who accused him of having a fling with him. And so they're trying to jail him for that. It's just, I mean, to describe it is to condemn it, isn't it? So we haven't been sitting silently by while this abuse continues. We've been filing Freedom of Information Act requests, trying to get information about what's going on up there with Alvin Bragg. And we did get some interesting information I want to share with you. The House Judiciary Committee, following Judicial Watch's lead, dare I say it, was demanding information from Bragg's office, wanting to talk to former prosecutor who had worked for him, I think in a volunteer capacity, was an anti-Trumper, and was engaged in pushing Bragg to indict Trump. And so there was a big legal fight. And Bragg was using an outside law firm, and we wanted to know how much money was being spent on this effort to obstruct congressional oversight over Biden's evident abuse of Donald Trump and other innocents up there in New York. And we received the engagement letter showing how the New York County District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, paid $900 per hour for partners and $500 an hour for associates at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. It's a big law firm. And it was for the purposes of suing Jim Jordan in an effort to shut down, as I said, the House Judiciary Committee's oversight investigation into Bragg's unprecedented indictment of former President Trump. Judicial Watch obtained the agreement as a result of a request that we engaged Freedom of Information law, not FOIA, but FOIL under New York law. And we just filed a request. And we got I think we got part of the engagement letter, but they kept out the numbers. And we filed an appeal, and they gave us the fuller version of the engagement letter as a result. The letter welcomes the Manhattan District Attorney's Office as a client and says that you are retaining us to provide legal services to the DA in connection with a congressional investigation, potential litigation, and related matters regarding the DA's investigation of Donald Trump. Initially redacted, as I said in its first production, the professional fees section states, for this matter, we have agreed on the following hourly rates for our attorneys, $900 per hour for partners and $500 per hour for associates. These rates will remain the same for the life of the matter. So the House Judiciary Committee had sent a letter back in March relating to what it called the unprecedented abuse of prosecutorial authority, the indictment of former President of the United States and current declared candidate for that office. So election interference by Bragg. And this is what the letter said. The New York County District Attorney's Office has been investigating President Trump since at least 2018, looking for some legal theory on which to bring charges. The facts regarding the impending indictment have been known for years. Michael Cohen, President Trump's disgraced former lawyer, pled guilty over 4 years ago to charges based on the same facts at issue in the impending indictment. By July 2019, however, federal prosecutors determined no additional people would be charged alongside Cohen. Now, in the words of one legal scholar, you are attempting to shoehorn the same case with the identical facts into a new prosecution, resurrecting a so-called zombie case against President Trump. Even the Washington Post quoted legal experts as calling your actions unusual because prosecutors have repeatedly examined long-established details but decided not to pursue charges, including this Justice Department, by the way. In addition to the novel and untested legal theory, your star witness for this prosecution has a serious credibility problem, a problem that you have reportedly recognized. The case relies heavily on the testimony of Michael Cohen, a convicted perjurer with a demonstrable prejudice against President Trump. Cohen pled guilty to lying to Congress in 2019, when he testified before Democrats on the House Oversight Committee to aid their fruitless investigation into Trump. Cohen lied again 6 times. Cohen has been vocal about his deeply personal animus towards Trump. Under these circumstances, there is no scenario in which Cohen could fairly be considered an unbiased and credible witness. And then, of course, on April 4th, his response to that letter was to indict Trump. And then they issued a subpoena compelling the testimony, the Judiciary Committee did, of former New York County Special Assistant Attorney Mark Pomerantz, who resigned from the office of the previous year because Bragg was reluctant to pursue charges against Trump. The committee in March had written Pomerantz a letter stating that his efforts to shame Bragg have worked, as he is reportedly resurrecting a so-called zombie case against Trump. So what did they do with this money they spent on the Gibson Dunn and Crutchell law firm? April 11th, Bragg filed a lawsuit against Jordan to block his alleged, quote, interference and obstruction of the investigation. And on April 19th, the federal court up there issued a decision denying Bragg's requested temporary restraining order, and the committee subsequently issued a statement showing that they're going to find, they have the right to get this information, including questioning Pomerantz, who I don't remember if he testified or not. I think he may have testified and took the fifth. Well, anyway, you can look it up. I guess I should have figured that out before I talked about it. Bragg's unjustified malicious prosecution is not only corrupt, but it's also a waste of taxpayer funds as he tries to thwart a legitimate House investigation into his attempt to interfere in the 2024 election. Rather than spending $900 per hour on lawyers to defend his abuse of office and political jihad against Trump, Bragg should focus on taking dangerous criminals off the streets of New York. As you know, being a left-wing prosecutor, they don't like to put real criminals in jail. So there's a lot of money being spent to abuse Trump, taxpayer money. So it's not only, as I say, an abuse of office, but an abuse of power. And similarly, there was just some new numbers put out today publicly by Jack Smith's investigation, the special counsel who's harassing Trump with another unprecedented indictment over this sham records and documents dispute that he and the Biden gang manufactured to try to jail Trump. They spent $5 million plus, I think $5.5 million on this investigation alone in the last 4 months since he was impaneled, I think, or maybe just since the last the first quarter of the year. Anyway, it's as much as I think the special counsel for Biden spent a fraction of that. He's looking at Biden's records, and you know where that's going to go. The point being, there's a lot of money being spent, and the government spends money, right? And they don't do it. They don't do things on the cheap, even though they probably should. So I understand that's the cost of doing business if they're doing legitimate investigations. But these aren't legitimate investigations. This is waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer funds used by political prosecutors to jail their opponents, not because they broke the law and they have a good faith reason to believe they broke the law, but because they're running for the wrong office against the wrong politician, their friend and ally Joe Biden. And in the case of the Justice Department, many of their jobs depend on Joe Biden continuing to be in office. So this corruption against Trump is costing you money. and it ain't stopping. And Judicial Watch, once again, shows up, stands in the gap, exposes the truth, gets the detail out, and exposes the waste up in New York with the abuse of Trump. That all being said, we had some good news this week as well. We had a decision out of the United States District Court for the Western District of Louisiana. You had two states, Louisiana in Missouri and, was it Mississippi, I think, sued? It was Mississippi, sued essentially Joe Biden and the Biden administration over its mass censorship program, where government agencies were coordinating with big tech to censor American citizens. And the court issued an injunction and judgment telling essentially 40 people across the Biden administration, including the Biden White House, the FBI, the Justice Department, Department of Homeland Security, and agencies in the Health and Human Services Department, that they can't talk to these big tech companies to try to censor Americans. And in the court decision, which I have here, it's 155 pages, and it's well worth reading. And I'm going to read you part of it. Highlights all the evidence that the states and their plaintiffs were able to obtain, showing the government's role in censoring you, fellow citizen, in denying you the right to information, fellow citizen, on these social media platforms. And topic after topic, you name it, the Hunter Biden laptop, COVID vaccines, COVID masks, COVID policies, election information and disputes about elections. This is a damning document that details the massive censorship of American citizens that's never really been seen before in American history in terms of the scope and sheer numbers of victims. And the injunction is really quite extraordinary. I don't know if it's going to hold up because it seems a little bit broad, but maybe not. I think a lot of it's going to hold up. The Biden administration issued an emergency appeal because they didn't want to stop censoring Americans for any reason, especially as it's getting close to an election, right? And the judge enjoined, the judge in this case is Judge Terry Doughty, D-O-U-G-H-T-Y. I think that's how his name is pronounced. That's how I would pronounce it. And he issued this on Independence Day, aptly, in defense of the First Amendment. So he enjoined the defense, as I said, all these agencies, HHS, National Institutes of Health, all these officials in the agency. I think it's like 40 officials. The Surgeon General's office, the Surgeon General, top officials in the Biden White House, from doing the following. They're enjoined and restrained from taking the following actions as to social media companies. Meeting with social media companies for the purpose of urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner the removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech, specifically flagging content or posts on social media platforms and or forwarding to such social media companies urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing the removal of protected free speech. Urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner social media companies to change their guidelines for removing, deleting, suppressing, or reducing content containing free speech, protected free speech. Emailing, calling, sending letters, texting, or engaging in any communication of any kind with social media companies urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner for removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech. Collaborating, coordinating, partnering, switchboarding. Switchboarding is like connecting, right? Switchboard, I want to be connected to this group. Or jointly working with the Election Integrity Partnership, a government-funded entity, by the way, the Virality Project, the Stanford Internet Observatory, or any other like project or group for the purpose of encouraging, pressuring, or inducing, in any manner, removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content posted with social media companies containing free speech. Threatening, pressuring, or coercing social media companies, etc. So essentially, they have to stop communicating with social media companies direct. I could go on, but you get the picture. They have to stop connecting with social media companies to censor material, suggest that they censor material, suggest that they change their policies to censor material specifically, and then they have to stop using these private cutouts, which I've talked about, to try to do what they can't do directly, which is to censor Americans based on their First Amendment protected views. And the judge explains the First Amendment. And by the way, this decision has caused the left to go crazy because they don't believe in the First Amendment. They oppose your free speech rights. They believe if you're saying something that is, quote, false or something they don't like, even if it's true and it harms their agenda, you should be censored. And big tech is obligated to do so. The following quotes the judge deals. I gotta open this up. I gotta be careful here. I've got tennis elbow, so my arm is kind of screwed up and it hurts depending on what I do. So that hurts. If I hold these documents wrong, it hurts, so I gotta be careful. I gotta hold them like this. Tennis elbow, I guess you get to a certain age, things start breaking down, right? The following quotes reveal the Founding Fathers' thoughts on freedom of speech. For if men are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter which may involve the most serious and alarming consequences that can invite the consideration of mankind, reason is of no use to us. The freedom of speech may be taken away, and dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep to the slaughter. George Washington, March 15, 1783. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin with subduing the free acts of speech. Benjamin Franklin, Letters of Silence Dogwood. Reason and free inquiry are the only effectual agents against error, error, E-R-R-O-R. Thomas Jefferson. The question does not concern whether speech is conservative, moderate, liberal, progressive, or somewhere in between. What matters is that Americans, despite their views, will not be censored or suppressed by the government. Other than well-known exceptions to the Free Speech Clause, all political views and content are protected free speech. The issues presented to this court are important and deeply intertwined in the daily lives of citizens in this country. And so I encourage you to read this full decision. I will read a little bit of it to you, but you can see it's pretty comprehensive. I pulled it out by section. This is the section. This is pages 9 through, let's see, 27, detailing paragraph after paragraph of the Biden White House directly intervening to get Americans censored. It's evidence. This is the Surgeon General and HHS and NIAID. So these are another 28 through, these are another over nearly 30 pages of evidence about COVID censorship. And then you've got the FBI censoring Americans as well. Significant information there. And the judge specifically highlights how this is what the left says is that a government has free speech rights to tell companies to take Americans' free speech material down. Well, that's not true. The government doesn't have free speech rights. I mean, it can communicate information, but it has to be done in a lawful way. And you can't do something, have someone else do what you can't do directly, right? Doesn't that make sense? I can't violate your civil rights, but I can tell this person to go and do it as a government official? No, that's not the way it works. And then they say, well, you know, we're just suggesting it's not coercion. Well, that's not how the evidence describes what went on. They were threatening and coercing, and both directly and indirectly. And the court goes through, for instance, what the White House was communicating to to the big tech companies in terms of pressuring them to censor. And I want to go through some of this because you're not going to hear it from the media, and you're probably not going to read it, so I'm going to read a bunch of it to you. This is what the White House defendants were doing to get you censored. And these are all quotes from emails or details about what they did. Email quote from the White House to big tech. Can't stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. Please remove this account immediately. They were telling him to remove the account of an American citizen. Accused Facebook of, quote, causing political violence, unquote, by failing to censor false COVID-19 claims. You are hiding the ball, yelling at big tech. Internally, we have been considering our options on what to do about it, threatening big tech. I care mostly about what actions and changes you are making to ensure you're not making our country's vaccine hesitancy problem worse. More threats? This is exactly why I want to know what reduction actually looks like. If reduction means pumping our most vaccine hesitant audience with Tucker Carlson saying it does not work, then I'm not sure what that's reduction. So big tech told them we're reducing Tucker Carlson's reach, and they said you're not doing it enough. Questioning how the Tucker Carlson video had been demoted since there were 40,000 shares. Again, big tech saying, well, we demoted Tucker Carlson, we suppressed him like you wanted us to, and the White House says it's not enough. Wanting to know why Alex Berenson, who's a former New York Times reporter who became front and center in this debate in questioning COVID narratives pushed out by the government and big media. Wanting to know why Alex had not been kicked off Twitter because Berenson was the epicenter of disinformation that radiated outside to the persuadable public. We want to make sure YouTube had a handle on vaccine hesitancy, is working towards making the problem better. Noted that vaccine hesitancy was a concern that is shared by the highest, and I mean the highest levels at the White House. So not only did they want Alex knocked out, but they highlighted how the highest levels at the White House, meaning the President of the United States, wanted this censorship to occur. There's another, let me just read a few others here. Hey folks, wanted to flag the below tweet, and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process of having it removed, period, ASAP. White House telling someone to remove a tweet on Twitter. How many times can someone show false COVID-19 claims before being removed? Again, this is the White House talking to big tech, the judge, jury, and executioner for these giant companies. I've been asking you guys pretty directly over a series of conversations the biggest issues you are seeing on your platform when it comes to vaccine hesitancy and the degree to which borderline content, as you define it, is playing a role. So basically, they're pressuring the big tech companies to take down, quote, borderline content, which is, by the way, content that is not that it should be taken down if it's, quote, false, but stuff that is not false, but they don't like because it results in the wrong narrative as the White House is as far as the White House is concerned. Seems like your dedicated vaccine hesitancy policy isn't stopping the disinfo dozen. So they were targeting 12 people who these front groups on the outside, these private groups, had targeted. And so this is the White House saying you got to target these people better. How much proof do you need that the Biden White House was involved in violating the civil rights of millions of Americans, the free speech rights? This is a civil rights issue that we all need to be talking about. And by the way, Judicial Watch was targeted here. These groups were targeting Judicial Watch. They were targeting, I'm constantly referred to as being on this list of people being putting out disinformation. Well, the White House wanted big tech to suppress those people, including me. Judicial Watch was also on these lists. The communists love creating lists of people to go after. And so Judicial Watch was on this list. I was on the list. I think I was number 4. I was disappointed I was number 4. The commies only made me number 4 on their list of people to target. I was right up there with President Trump and some other folks who were telling the truth in a way the left didn't want to hear at the time. So Judicial Watch is as much a victim as I've talked about before. We had this litigation in California where a state government, California Secretary of State, had YouTube take down a video of ours about election integrity. So you have this unholy alliance. You had the White House directly communicating with big tech. You had state and government officials directly and indirectly communicating with big tech to censor Americans. And you've got to go back to the first part of the last century where American speech was being suppressed by the Democratic President Woodrow Wilson to find anything comparable. And of course, the country's a lot smaller then. But now you have hundreds of millions of people potentially being suppressed. Not only is their material being suppressed continuously, Twitter's gotten a lot better under Elon Musk, but Facebook and YouTube they backed away from some of the censorship, but not all of it, and they're still censoring material. You put up COVID material or vaccine material, either get labels that suppress your content, or they get these left-wing fact checkers pretend what you're saying is false, and your material is essentially deleted or shut down or made impossible to view. So the censorship continues. So to the degree the government's involved, this federal court judge has bravely said no more. And frankly, there's about 40 people on this list of people who aren't allowed to talk to big tech to censor American citizens. And if I were Congress, I'd look at this list of names and say, well, who can we have fired by defunding their positions? Congress should step up and defend this censorship, defund this censorship. And the question is, will they? I hope so. But, we've been waiting forever and a day on some other things for Congress to do in terms of protecting America from this unbelievable attack on a Republican system of government, whether it be the abuses and efforts to try to jail Trump and other American citizens, the massive censorship of American citizens by the federal government, including especially the Biden administration most recently. And let's be clear, it began with the deep state under Trump in the 2020 elections, for sure, with the Hunter Biden cover-up and such, and the censorship associated with that. And so, thank God these attorney generals in the states and other private plaintiffs took action here to at least stop some of it from happening in a continued way. And the question is it going to hold up? And of course, Congress can step in and defund the censorship. And the fact that it hasn't happened is something that's terribly disappointing, outrageous. I can't say I'm surprised. But Speaker McCarthy needs to get his act together here, because the censorship is obviously violative of the First Amendment, but it's also election interference, because a lot of the censorship has to deal with debates about either the way elections are run or issues that are prominent in the election. And so we see that with the transgender extremist agenda, which the Democratic Party and Joe Biden's administration has embraced. There's all sorts of censorship related to that. Is the government behind it? Why are we funding it? And there comes a point in time where you have to recognize, dear citizen, that everything you don't like the Biden administration, in terms of what it's doing, in terms of censorship or abuse, you have to remember it's being funded by Republicans in the House. Okay? The Republican majority in the House is funding. Now, does every Republican want to fund it? No. But that's the political reality of it. And they're unwilling to shut down the government over it, to stop it. So there are ways to get it done. They just don't want to do it. And so Judicial Watch can't defund the government or these agencies or these individual employees or fire them directly. But we can expose what's going on, and that's why we have several lawsuits to uncover this, as we've talked about. And we just sued last week the HHS agency that is the center of the censorship operation, the cybersecurity, I forget what it's called, CISA. I forget what the acronym is. Why don't you all come up with a funny acronym below for it as it relates to censorship? This Department of Homeland Security has a specific agency that's been coordinating all this censorship. And we sued for more information from that agency to see what else they've been up to. So this court action is necessary. It's not sufficient because they're going to think of ways to run around it. Certainly the courts may restrict this injunction, allow a bit more censorship to take place. But secondly, Congress can shut it all down And until that happens, then maybe we can provide more information to highlight why Congress should do it. And this is why we sue under FOIA, and in the case of California, sue directly to enforce our civil rights. So this is a big civil rights issue, the First Amendment. It's been under attack like it's never been attacked before in American history. And so a good decision. We'll link below for you to read its entirety. So before I go, this has been a big week for me personally, because this week is the 25th anniversary of my becoming president of Judicial Watch. I've been here for 25 years, and it's been an honor, and we've got a great team. Obviously, our current team is great. Paul Orphanides and Chris Farrell, who run our litigation and investigations teams. Steve Anderson, who runs our fundraising team. You know, it's just a great team effort here. We've got our fundraisers, obviously, a bunch of lawyers and paralegals, and our media department, and our administrative department, our investigative department. So I don't do it alone. But 25 years is a long time, as you can see. I think we have a picture back when I was much younger. My hair was a little bit darker. I'm a little bigger, a lot grayer since then. But you know, I tell you, I feel like I can do this another 25 years. And I certainly think the urgency is as present now as it was 25 years ago when I began during the Clinton administration. And things were urgent there in terms of government corruption. As I said, our republic's under attack. So, I mean, there's a lot to do in the years ahead, and I'm ready to do it. I'm prepared to do it, and I'd like to thank again my colleagues for working with me over the years, and of course I want to thank you, our supporters. We have millions of people who supported Judicial Watch, both financially and morally. You pray for us, you give us money, you share the information, you help us educate fellow Americans about what we do. And Judicial Watch is the largest and most effective government watchdog group, not only in the country, but dare I say it, in the world. And we can't do it without your support. I'm pleased to have been here 25 years, and God willing, I'll be here 25 more. And with that, I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.